1. So when I was about 10 years old, over 20 years ago, my parents and I lived in a 2-story home in Rialto, California. It was your standard tract home. There were 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor and 1 guest room on the 1st floor. My parents decided to rent the guest room for a bit of extra money. The person that they rented it out to was a younger guy, probably in his early 20s. He was mostly gone throughout the day with work. He was mellow and nice and kept to himself mostly. I remembered he was into rock like Guns N' Roses, Whitesnake, etc. I say that because he was always wearing rock t-shirts and had the long-haired rock look from the late 80s, early 90s. Moving on. The house had an open floor plan on the 1st floor, and from the inner table you had a perfect view of the stairs. My mother, at the time, was a nurse, and a couple times a week she would work late. My dad would make dinner on those nights and have it ready for my mom when she would get home, which was usually around 9 p.m. On this particular night my mom was working. The roommate was still out and hadn't come home as well. So I was sitting at the dinner table doing my homework, and my dad asked me to clear the table because dinner was ready. As I closed my notebook and started to put my homework away, I felt someone was looking at me or watching me. I looked around and didn't see anything. I finished putting my homework in my backpack, and my dad brings a plate for him and I. This next moment is burned in my mind and will never be forgotten. My dad puts the plate in front of me, and I look at the plate to see what he had cooked. As I lift my head to look at him and tell him thanks, I see a woman just standing at the top of the stairs. She's wearing all white like a wedding dress, and she's staring right at me. She turns her stare away from me and starts focusing on the stairs and the handrail. She starts walking down very slowly, but she had a flow to it. When she gets to the bottom of the stairs, I remember my whole body going cold. And my dad looks at me and asks me, "What's wrong?" He says, "Your face is white, are you okay?" I didn't respond to him, I just kept staring at the woman. I thought she was going to walk right towards us. Instead, she turns and walks down the short hallway into the guest room. I stand straight up and start walking towards the guest room. The entire time that I'm doing this, I could hear my dad saying, "Hey, what's wrong? What are you doing?" I get to the hallway and look down, and I see no one. So I figured if she went anywhere, then it must be the guest room, but the guest room was usually always locked. So I get to the door, and it's unlocked. I open it slowly and peek my head inside to look around. It's a small room, so there wouldn't be anywhere to hide. By this time, my dad catches up to me and asks me what the hell I'm doing. I told him I saw the woman walk into the room. He swings the door wide open, turns on the lights, and doesn't see anyone. But what he does end up seeing is a bunch of pentagrams all over the walls and such. He slams the door shut and tells me to go eat dinner. The entire time I'm telling him that there's a lady in all white in the guest room. He ends up disregarding it or something, just telling me okay, so I calm down. I overhear him that night telling my mom what he saw in the guest room, the pentagrams and stuff, and what I had saw. She starts freaking out and telling him that he better kick the roommate out. The thing is, after that night, the guy never came back to the house. My parents waited a couple of days and then started to call his references. Everyone they called had never heard of him. A couple of weeks later, they ended up filing a missing persons report and just left it at that. They ended up throwing all his stuff out, and we never ever heard of that guy ever again. Nothing strange ever happened in that house again either, and I still wondered what happened to that guy. We ended up moving to another city due to my dad's work a few years later, but that memory stayed with me. 2. This was in 2007. I was in my mid-20s and would go and look for places for my friends and me to party. Not bars or houses, but just places that seemed cool to hang out. My friend Scott brings up that he knows of this place called the Haunted Mansion. I was never a believer in ghosts and say it sounds like a blast, let's check it out. I instantly fall in love. It's a few miles from Van Buren in Riverside, California. Driving up there is no sidewalk or concrete, it's all dirt for about 1/8 of a mile, with some old dead plants that were more likely at one time a large garden with dense trees on both sides. The mansion itself is on a vista with a steep round driveway up to what used to be a fountain in a circular driveway. A burnt down mansion with some standing but burnt framework, a pool, and a large garage that had a hole in it with a fire pit in the middle. So it was great for the California winter. Going there once every other week or so, depending on if the usual faces got the time off work to come out. So we had gone there quite often over 4 months. After a few nights, Scott told me the story of what happened to the family that lived there. They had an unstable kid that one day lost it, grabbed a shotgun and killed his siblings and mother, and when the father drove home. Lastly, he burned the house down before taking his own life. I never really cared and said, "Oh, telling some cheesy ghost stories, huh?" I would eat those words. One night my ex had gone to look at the area, as it is interesting, and got really lost. When I walked and finally found her an hour later, she's a mile away, and when we got back, was acting really strange. Not just a little odd, but grabbing her bag for the night and threw it in the fire weird. I struck it up to being really drunk at the time, but looking back, was more than likely possession. The night of the big encounter, I decided to bring a few more friends and normal, so we had about 13 people there. Other than that, nothing's different. We are doing our normal thing, drinking beer and a few of us smoking some pot. One of my friends I've known for a long time, I will call him Dan, walks off and says he wants to take a look at this place. It seems really cool. I say, "Yeah, man, be careful not to get lost as my ex did." Dan says, "No worries, I will not go far. It's hard to miss the fire." Scott, at this point, is complaining that he might have an asthma attack. "I never knew you had asthma," I say. He replies, "I do not normally keep an inhaler as it does not happen that much." But it decided to happen that night. As we have all been drinking, "Can anyone help?" I ask. He says, "I feel worse. I will call Pat." After an hour or so, Dan comes out of the darkness and asks for me to come with him. I walk with him, and he is talking about he doesn't want to freak everyone else out. He says he keeps seeing this car doing strange things and is wondering if anyone else is coming. I say no. Who is here is all that is coming. We stand there for about 10 minutes. I see a car's headlights turn on, move forward 5 or so feet, stop, and turn the lights off. But there are no taillights on it. Another 10 or so minutes, the same thing happens. I ask Dan, "Are you going to hang out here for a while?" He says, "Yeah, this place is really cool." I hand him a few beers and he goes about his own thing. Scott, that has been having problems, asks me if he can use my cell phone as his has no signal, and he needs to call Pat. He is really going to have an attack. I figure if he is going to come out, he might be able to see that car and ask him to check it out on his way up. About half an hour passes and my friend that was on the lookout is back at the party, as the car is still moving slowly but not really doing anything. Pat arrives, gives Scott his inhaler, and after he is a bit better. I ask Pat if he saw anything. He says no, but I will check again on my way out. I call him when he drives off, and I explain when you are almost at the exit, it will be at the end of the trees on your right. He says, "No, Ogre, I see nothing at all." I am looking at him from the vista, and he is even directly facing where the car was last pointed with his brights on. I say thanks to Pat for helping out Scott again and drive safely home. At this point, I have told everyone what is going on, and that car more than likely moved on, but we check it out every 30 or so minutes to make sure he was gone. After a few hours, Dan, Scott, and I go to check. The car has returned, and it has started doing its creeping up thing again, so we stand there. The others have been waiting to see this strange car, so Dan walks off to get them while I watch. 4 or 5 of them come up. The car has become a bit more frequent with its creeping at this point. The other friends are saying maybe they do not know we are up here, or maybe it's the cops. Then all of a sudden, it turns onto the dirt road and not stopping. We all freak out as we think it's cops. We all start running. I tell the ones that are driving to turn off their headlights so we are harder to see. We drive down the roundabout. I am the second car out of the 3. I and the front car see lights. Not in front of us, but going up above us on the right side, going up a nearly sheer cliff. We turn our headlights on and haul ass. I have the fastest car in the group and book it to the front first. I went so fast that I hear my tires squealing on dirt. I never knew that could happen. I am almost at the end of the dirt and am looking down the road on the right side as we get to the end. I see a car coming down the road, not far enough so I can make a safe turn in time. While I wait for the car to pass, I check for another possible car, and I see smoke coming out of the ground. No embers, nothing. The other friends see this too, and finally the car passes and we all get the hell out of there. Three. I've always enjoyed the paranormal. Mythology, lore, and legends are my bread and butter, and I've had quite a few strange occurrences. I got my teeth into Greek mythology and loved reading about the gods and their, adventures when I was young. Not quite sure what you can call what Zeus would get up to an adventure, but that's something else for another day, perhaps. Now, being a youngster and reading all the tales of adventure and such made me wonder if they were still or could still be around. One night after reading the legend of Arachne and Athena, I decided to offer something to Athena. At the time, my family lived in my grandmother's former house, a small thing not fit for a family of 5, and I had a small cot on the ground with an old milk crate to use as a makeshift nightstand. I had balled up some old string I had laying around and basically offered it to Athena. Not much, I know, but I felt it was something worthy of giving the goddess. I went to sleep with the ball of string sat in my milk crate nightstand. Now, before going further, I should explain how the house's sleeping area was set up, and also explain that this was meant to be a temporary thing until my family moved down south to Florida. The sleeping area was in the back of the house near the bathroom. There was a division between the cots for privacy, which came from some spare curtains. The rest of the house was set up to accommodate the family as best as possible, with the kitchen just left of the restroom. The restroom took about a solid corner or so of the 30 by 40 house, with the dining room to the right of that. Behind the dining room was the living space, sectioned off the sleeping spot by a couch. Not much to it than that. Yeah, a bit simple. I didn't really expect to have anything happen, and still see it there in the morning. The small ball of yarn was hidden from view of anyone but me, so when I woke and didn't see it there, or anywhere else, I wondered. I spent the better half of an hour trying to figure out where or how the ball had gone missing to. My bed space was small, and I didn't have much to it other than the cot, a pillow, bedsheet, and blanket, so I didn't have too much to pore over. After practically turning the place over and looking around in a 5-foot radius, I gave up and let it go, pondering if it had been taken by the goddess or my parents had probably seen it and thrown it away. My parents, though, aren't too observant, sorry Mom and Pop, and wouldn't have noticed something small like that in the shadows of my nightstand unless someone had brought it to their attention. Even then, removing it without disturbing me would have proven very difficult in the night, with nary an inch between cot and crate. I've since let the event grow dusty in the back of my mind, but watching some videos from Mythology and Fiction Explained on the good old YouTubes brought the event back and has me wondering, do the old gods still exist? Can we somehow commune with them? If one pantheon exists, does that mean others do too? I've since expanded my armchair lore enthusiast arsenal of myths, legends, folktales, and such, and wonder if leaving offerings wouldn't win some fantastic, as in fantasy, not awesome, favor. 4. Hi everybody. A few days ago my boyfriend and I decided to take a trip down to Long Beach to visit the Queen Mary. We were originally supposed to have gone to LA, but last minute that didn't pan out. So we headed to Long Beach. A friend of mine had mentioned exploring the Queen Mary a couple of months ago. Thus I was inspired. Plus the hotel was running a spring break 20% off special, so it seemed like the perfect time to go. Here are my experiences. We got to the ship around 5 p.m. and checked in quickly and went to our room, which was B418. Immediately upon entering the room, I felt like someone was watching me, which was a really creepy feeling. My boyfriend didn't seem to notice until he was laying on the bed and one of the lamps turned on by itself. It was really strange. My boyfriend is skeptical, but that definitely rattled him. We had dinner on super fancy Sir Winston's with a friend, and not much else happened that night. Aside from hearing voices, and my boyfriend heard hammering at around 2 a.m. The walls are pretty thin, and when people are walking and talking down the hall, you can hear everything very clearly. So it could have been a regular guest, not otherworldly ones. The hammering at 2 a.m. is strange. But there was a lot of construction going on in the boat. So that also can't be attributed to the paranormal. My friend, thinking he was being funny, called the front desk and said that there was a ghost in the room. The front desk replied that they had to move people out of our room on several occasions. The next day, we checked out and went on tours. The historical tour was pretty boring, to be honest. The next tour we went on was the haunted tour, and it was actually pretty cool. I had been to the Queen Mary about 10 years ago for my uncle's graduation, and had taken the ghost tour then. Back then, it was like a haunted house and super disappointing. This time around, they took us through a room where some magician did us a show. The room was painted black and had pictures of the people who died on the ship, along with descriptions of how they died. There were also supposedly haunted items in glass cases. Then we were led further into the room, where there were some props. My boyfriend and I were at the back of the group. It was a large group of about 30 people. A woman in front of me was taking pictures, and my boyfriend and I were trying to listen. All of a sudden, to my right, I hear a little girl whispering. I was totally confused and actually jumped, because I was so startled and knocked into the lady taking pictures. I asked her if she heard anything, and she said no. I looked at my boyfriend and asked if he heard that. We waited a second, and we heard it again, while the lady in front of us did not. My boyfriend went around looking for speakers but couldn't find any. The only speakers he could find were visible and were playing music. I honestly thought it had to be speakers, but it was so clear and close to me it sounded like a 6-year-old trying to tell a secret. I was pretty spooked. Then the tour guide locked us all into a creepy room for a few minutes and let us explore. Lots of people were taking pictures, and the lady I had bumped into had her camera out, and we saw something whitish and bluish move on her screen. It was pretty cool. She managed to capture a photo with a pronounced orb in it, but sadly no video. Next, our group went down to the boiler room, which freaked me out on a whole nother level. Right as we stepped inside, I felt sick with heaviness and dread and dry heaved, almost to the point of puking. I really hated it in there. It was such an oppressive place. Even my boyfriend said he felt heaviness in his feet and legs, and that he also did not like it in there. Later, we went on our last tour, steam and steel, of the boiler room, engine room, and a few other rooms. Just as before, I felt really anxious and dry-heaved. As the tour guide was talking, I felt a burning sensation on my thigh, like someone pressed their thumb onto me really hard. I later had a bruise in that spot. On this tour, there are only 4 other people, so we had more time and space to explore. My boyfriend and I went into one of the rooms on the right side of the boiler room, and we heard tapping noises, which was really unsettling. We joined the group again, and nothing really happened until we got to the engine room and saw the emergency watertight door 13, which is supposedly haunted. I took a picture and lingered behind the group. I kept looking back, and as I was leaving to walk up the escalator, I clearly heard heavy footsteps coming after me. I wasn't scared, but had a heavy, sad feeling. As we were heading back up from the engine room, we passed the 4D theater. My boyfriend is a huge movie buff and loves theaters, so I motioned for him to take a peek. There were double doors, and one of the doors was open. He popped in, and I stood next to the door. Suddenly the door swung with such force, I thought someone was behind it, even though I knew nobody was there. My boyfriend yelped and came through the door. We checked, but nobody was there. Later, we were wandering around and got a bit lost looking for the infamous pool. The haunted tour used to take you through it, but it is now closed to the public, although there is a door you can use to see it. While we were walking through A deck, roughly around the 300s, my boyfriend was in front of me, and I felt like someone shoved my left shoulder. I actually cried out, "Ow!" because it had so much force. Just like my thigh, later we checked my body and I had another thumbprint bruise on my shoulder as well. We also went down to the isolation ward, which was super creepy. We heard noises like tappings and hightailed it out of there. All in all, my verdict is that the Queen Mary definitely has activity going on. Even my boyfriend had to admit that there were a couple things that he could not explain. We plan on going back again and staying 2 nights instead of 1. 5. When my dad retired from the American military, my parents bought a nice house that had been built in the 1920s. It had all that beautiful old Art Deco look. Beautiful hardwood floors, crystal chandeliers, a beautiful big fireplace, and a ghost. Now, my dad was pretty much the only one in my family who wasn't a believer. He acknowledged odd things, but wasn't as into paranormal stuff as the rest of us. Me, my mom, and to a lesser extent my younger brother. They had bought this house because it was in their price range. The couple who had it wanted to do a fast sale, funnily enough not because of the ghost, but because they were having a very nasty divorce. The sort of nasty divorce where my parents went to sign the contract. They were having a screaming fight in the living room over who would keep the cat because neither wanted it. So my dad took it. Anyway, shortly after we moved in, I got the feeling something was there. It's not like psychic or anything, but just the feeling you get when you walk into someone else's house. It's not your house, you're just visiting. It was still welcoming and nice, so I wasn't worried. I have lived in other active houses. Other stories will come. And inactive houses, so at 17 I knew what the feeling meant, and since it wasn't very threatening, I just let it be. The only time I got annoyed was when it pushed a pile of papers off my desk. It's pretty well known a ghost can short out electronics, and I was worried about my computer, so I said clearly, "I don't mind you being here, but please don't play with my computer. I don't want it getting messed up or anything with energy. It's not your fault, electronics and energy just don't mix." Whenever anything happened in my room after that, it was never near my desk. My mom was the one who taught me to address them calmly and nicely, since it's just another person after all. I didn't know what it was for sure until a couple years after we moved in. Like I said, we had hardwood floors all throughout, cold in winter. I was wearing socks, and unfortunately, socks on varnished wood stairs is a stupid idea. Predictably, I fell. I managed to catch the banister, but I wrenched my wrist pretty badly. So, sitting at the bottom of the stairs and breathing through the pain before testing if I was okay, I felt something on my wrist. I fully expected one of our dogs, so I looked over, but no one was there. I could feel the hands on my wrist. It was kind of cold, not freezing, but sort of like someone who had been outside on a cold day without gloves. Then it was gone. I think she was trying to make sure I was okay. But I didn't know it was a she until a few months later. I'd have a late shift at work. I was in retail at the time, and was exhausted. I didn't process at first that when I unlocked the front door, my dogs weren't running or barking or anything. Now, the staircase was directly across from the front door. I don't know why I looked up them at that moment, if I heard something or instinct. But at the top of the stairs were my 2 dogs, and between them was a little girl. She was petting both of them, happy as a clam. Then she was just gone. I think maybe I blinked. The dogs stayed there a moment longer before they got up and rushed down the stairs with their usual welcoming barks. I never did see her like that again, but I felt her a couple more times before we left. First, when me and my brother swapped rooms. He wanted the bigger bedroom, and I didn't mind. And once, when I'd had the first of several very, very bad fights with my boyfriend, I felt that same hand just rubbing my back reassuringly. My mom had seen her and tried talking to her, but she never spoke. Not sure why. We know she knew and recognized us, so she wasn't like an echo, she was a fully aware ghost. If I had to guess, I'd say she was 8 or 9. We talked about looking into the home's history, but between work, my dad's depression from retirement, and my brother being in high school, it just never happened. So I don't know if she was part of the house or the land. The area we lived in was the historical district, all big old fancy houses. But she never made us feel unwelcome. She never did anything nasty or broke anything. Mostly she liked to move books and papers. I think she liked to read or something. I like to think she was happy to have a nice family in her home that didn't mind her there. And of course our dogs who were pretty calm about her. I think because we had them from puppies, so they had always been around her, and just accepted her as part of the family. The town I lived in was hit by a terrible flood shortly after I moved, so sometimes I wonder if she's okay. The house is still there, though. A lot of the original stuff is gone from the basement and first floor. Hopefully, though, this hasn't done any damage to her. It must suck being stuck as a ghost, but she was a good girl, so I like to hope she's okay. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 134. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I'm going to keep this outro short because I'm still not feeling great. This is probably going to be a pretty lengthy process getting better. Thankfully, I'm still able to record, not the way I usually do, but I'm getting things done. And while I know you guys wouldn't mind if I took a break, I don't want to. I'd much rather keep working, not just because the channel has to keep earning, but I feel better if I get a video done. I feel productive, I feel like I've done something, so it's better for my overall mood. Anyway, I think that's enough yammering on. I'll head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.